You talk about the four of the key triggers for vices, for addictions, for things like that. So touch on those because that awareness can help people if they're thinking right now, is this a vice? Like start to think through, are these the moments when I engage in that behavior, that activity?
Look at how your life is going and the results that you're getting. Are they the results that you want? And what could be holding you back? How can you remove things or put boundaries in your life to get more of what you want?
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Better Together. Taps. When we high five, it claps on camera. Today, we are focusing on Amanda, Miss Amanda over here. Talking about her, talking about some personal things, some professional things, and definitely way outside of her comfort zone. So I'm going to go ahead and thank you before we even start. Say thank you for being open, honest, and candid and vulnerable. I'm just going to believe that's going to come from you. And yeah, I'm really excited to share a little bit of the story of the person who I get to spend my life with, because there's so many layers to her that most people never get to see, never get to find out, never get to hear. And now we're hearing it straight from the source. So today we're going to talk a little bit about Amanda's backstory, multi-generational backstory, her connection to the Mennonite community, maybe even define what that is for those of you who don't know, and dive into some of how that's informed her ability to choose to do hard things, including removing vices, and get into some of those, and hopefully have a few practical takeaways for everybody. So without further ado, why don't we get into it?
Sure.
You're the third consecutive generation of immigrants.
Correct.
Your family started in what is now Ukraine, and then immigrated to Paraguay, and then immigrated to Canada, where you were born. You're the first generation in your family to be born and raised in Canada, and then you kept the tradition alive.
Well, you forced me.
I forced you.
You forced me to do that.
I brought you to the U.S.
I'm just kidding. All jokes aside. So my grandparents escaped communist Russia with their mothers. My great-grandfathers were all taken as prisoner of war. It was during the time when Stalin was in reign. And it was USSR, Soviet Union at the time. They left, immigrated, or fled to South America with the help of an organization called MCC, the Mennonite Central Committee. For as many generations back as I've been able to research, back to like the 1500s, my family lived in that area, and they're Russian Mennonites.
I'm really curious about immigration
Okay,
and how
so
that's impacted you, how you believe it's impacted where you are today, and how it impacted the history of your family.
I think there are different ways that you immigrate. There are different reasons that you immigrate, like when you're fleeing because of political persecution, religious persecution, or if you're, making a decision like we made to move somewhere for a better life or better opportunities. There are different things that come with that, right?
They say that moving, there's trauma involved in all moves,
Sure.
right? Moving, but there are different degrees of
Absolutely.
trauma, and our move, while having its own trauma, the separation from family and friends, which was very hard, was different.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you said there's all different reasons. How do you think that those reasons impacted your life and how they impacted the life of the people before you?
So I feel like because of always knowing growing up this backstory of my, great-grandparents, grandparents fleeing and having to start from nothing. My great-grandmothers, I remember hearing stories of my great-grandmother had 7 children, and she moved to South America, to the desert, to the Chaco, and was given basic tools and had to build a life from nothing, from a mud hut to the mud oven that they would cook in, and just having a few basic tools and blankets and seeds and starting a life. I think knowing that backstory, even as a small child, I knew that there was something inside of me that came from that bloodline or from those people that produced this resilience or this drive, this determination to make it in a place where the odds were stacked against you. So that's our story, and that's the story I've always known. And then my parents immigrated as small children from South America, where our family lived for like 50 years to Canada for a better opportunity. Some family members or some friends or people in the community immigrated straight to Canada from Europe. And so there were better opportunities there. My parents were small children when their parents decided to move there. My parents met in Canada, got married, and then
When you say
sent me.
there, I kind of lose you a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
just to restate what you're saying. So with an absence of grown men, all the women
Right.
and children moved to Paraguay,
Sure. Yep.
to the Chaco. And then your grandparents decided that that was not the right place to settle. After your parents were born in Paraguay and Paraguay, then your whole family immigrated to Canada.
Well, so my parents did not know each other in Paraguay as children. They only met as children or as teenagers in Canada. So their families separately immigrated.
Okay.
I don't know, I don't know what that thought process or that reasoning was, but so
Parallel paths of both sides of the family, but not walking
correct.
together.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. And their families were then already established. My grandparents moved. I know my grandpa, for instance, was a teenager when all of that, fleeing happened, and then he established a life and built a family. And so his family, his own family was already established, and then that's when he made that decision to immigrate to Canada with his family, with his wife, and then he had 6 children of his own. So my grandparents were grown. They grew up in South America as immigrants there and then immigrated their families separately to Canada.
It sounds like there's a learning opportunity for everyone to really tap into what feels like and sounds like was almost a DNA imprinting on yourself through generations of people choosing to do hard things on purpose.
Absolutely.
And I would love to unpack like where you feel like that gift of that imprint on your DNA has benefited you today.
Yeah, I think that I didn't really put it all together growing up. It was just like that was just our story, right? But then as you grow up and you learn how, at least for myself, you and I have been really intentional about becoming more emotionally intelligent, self-aware, and as I've been learning, what it takes to be a successful person in life or what I view as a successful person, I've learned about how you have to be adaptable and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. And I think that all of those things, I love how you put that like an imprinting. I feel like that was imprinted on me early on. Even when I didn't know it, it was serving me as like fuel. I think that that's just something that whether your story is like mine or vastly different, you can tap into. We all have these lived experiences, right? And I mean, like, no matter what your family history is, your ancestors definitely went through stuff, to get you to where you are today. It took trials and tribulations and challenges that you don't even know about. And if you are gifted the awareness to maybe know about some of them, you can use that as fuel, I think. But even if you don't have that gift, you can know the utmost of your being that you have come from people who have been through stuff, right? Like we all go through these things in our life that make us who we are. And so I think that you can use that to like tap into to fuel your capabilities or your capacity, expand your capacity.
I'd like to tap into and ask a question about one specific component of that DNA imprinting. It's not just doing hard things.
Right.
It's your family lived in a relatively developed area of the world for that time and then moved to basically like caveman life.
Mm-hmm.
Mud huts, mud ovens, like desert, nothing that makes life easy.
Mm-hmm.
So your family did that, went backwards as far as a developed part of the world to a very undeveloped part, and then came to Canada, a developed part of the world, but started again with zero,
Right.
nothing, right?
And total
didn't
fish
even
out of water.
yeah.
Like I grew up across the street from a set of my grandparents, and I called them Oma and Opa. And my Oma and Opa never learned how to drive a car. They drove a horse and buggy in South America and Paraguay. And then when they moved to Canada, when they moved to Canada, they didn't learn the language. They didn't learn how to drive a car. They were total fish out of water, right? And so, yeah, so I think like Yeah, I've never really thought about it like that, like moving from different sort of developed stages of the world to underdeveloped to then more developed and try to adjust and adapt to those lifestyle changes. Um, yeah.
Let's stop for just a second because we've been talking about a term that's very familiar to us and maybe
Okay.
completely unfamiliar to other people. Tell me, what is a Mennonite?
Okay. So a lot of people are familiar with Amish, and it's very similar to that. Like a Mennonite is a religion and a culture. Okay. So I grew up religiously and culturally Mennonite. And so if you know anything about like the Amish culture, that is basically like how we grew up. So like
So you grew up with horse and buggy?
not horse and buggy.
Okay.
I grew up in Canada, so I was born and raised in Canada. It was more developed, but I went to a Mennonite church. We went to church multiple days a week and very tight knit, close community. On Sundays, we had a meal called FOSPA. You can't cook on Sundays, so we would cook everything on Saturdays. And so observing sort of like Mennonite traditional way of life as much as we could growing up in Canada with like modern things around us, right?
And what you're saying is that as recently as your grandparents' generation, they actually didn't grab onto the modern things of life. They still.
I feel like they had one foot in, one foot out.
Okay.
Right? Like, and then my parents' generation sort of was the generation that kind of broke free of those maybe traditions and things. Like we still observe them loosely. But like for instance, I was the first cousin on my side of the family to have dancing and alcohol at my wedding. So that was a big deal. And it was, it was kind of like, ooh, like, wow,
We
how
can
is
do
everybody?
this?
Yeah,
We can
how
do
is
this?
everyone going to react
Yeah.
to this? So
And they reacted
little,
great.
yeah, it felt a little.
That dance floor was hopping. That was a good
It
time.
was a really fun party. But yeah, so kind of breaking the mold a little bit, like with just certainly my parents' generation started that. My generation now, we're not living on Mennonite communes and driving horse and buggy and wearing a bonnet and a
Yeah.
long dress. Like, so I think slowly, like as generations kind of like, adapted to modern life in North America, things kind of changed. I still think like there are some beautiful traditions in the Mennonite culture. Um, so yeah, and I have cousins. I have family like first cousins that still live in Paraguay, where my parents were born, and so I have immediate family that is still living, a different lifestyle than I am and observing more of those cultural traditions.
So it's interesting, your immigration was not to an undeveloped part of the world. It
Mm-hmm.
was to one of the most developed parts of the world. So it's interesting when you draw that line from generation to generation to see like the extremes that your family and genetically your heritage that you guys have experienced these extremes. So coming down here, you weren't coming to an undeveloped place,
Correct.
but you were coming to a place that was totally new and where you didn't have any resources handed to you.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe talk a little bit about the hard of
Mm-hmm.
when you were going through that personal experience of being an immigrant and how that imprinting on your DNA helped you to navigate maybe broad picture, but maybe a few specifics as well.
Sure. So I never thought in a million years that I would be an immigrant. I knew where my family came from and the struggle, and it kind of felt like, okay, phew, like we're in Canada, we're here, we made it. And it felt like, okay, my generation was going to be the first generation to like fully live there. And we're Canadian now.
Born, raised,
Yes.
this is home, this is forever.
Then I met this cute boy
Oh,
with
hello.
long shaggy hair and
Those days are gone.
cargo shorts and
Those days are also gone.
a tongue ring.
Those days are also gone.
And he happened to be a dual citizen. His mom is American and his dad's Canadian. So after we got married,
Hold on. She's talking about me,
this guy.
just to be clear. This cute guy.
So after we got married, shortly after, Jobin developed some symptoms. They were underlying and then they exposed themselves. And we had a health crisis on our hands that forced us to move. So because of due to health circumstances, we had to move. We made the choice to move. You were given a diagnosis and the choices either were to get an indoor job or move to a warmer climate. And we were really at a fork in the road at that time and decided that
Are
because
you telling me that Southern California paradise beat out cold winters in Northern Alberta?
it did. It took a
Shocking.
while to explain that was
The reason for the
what, yeah.
move. Yeah, we weren't fleeing weather.
It really was truly a health crisis. But yeah, so we made that decision. We were at a stage in our life, newly married. We didn't have a lot of strings attached and young and able to make a transition pretty quickly. And we made that move. And so at that time, I really think like I was pretty naive. I didn't think that there was much of a difference between Canada and the US. Boy, was I wrong. And every immigration story is different. Ours included starting up a business. And if you're starting up a business where you grew up and you've been from for multi generations and you're backed by maybe family money or if you're a trust fund kid or whatever, it's still hard. So boy, oh boy, like did we have the odds stacked against us.
Well, I feel like every immigration is by definition a bet on yourself.
Sure.
I can go to a place where I have limited resources, limited community, limited help, and I can make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so maybe that's part of the DNA imprint where it's not just choosing to do hard things. It's I don't need someone to help me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, certainly people come along that play an influential role in every success story, but you had learned through your genetics to do hard things and to not be afraid of them and to not say no just because it's hard. And that kind of, that carried you through and gave you the confidence from, what I've seen from, multiple consecutive generations of betting on themselves.
Yeah.
And it improving.
Yeah. And I think I like either subconsciously or consciously have thought that throughout our journey, like moving here, immigrating here 15 years ago, we've been through so much. We've come so far from sleeping on floors to being on WIC to, like
What's WIC?
Food stamps, basically.
Excellent.
It's government assistance.
And
so
we did upgrade
we
from
eating
floors fairly quickly to air mattresses. We just got stuck at that level for quite a while.
Well, so yeah, we were roughing it, right? For a good chunk of time to build up our business and make it work here. And we had to sacrifice a lot. And I think that sacrifice came easier to me because, when you know where you come from and that place that you come from is having a great grandmother who, slept on the dirt floor of her mud hut with her 7 children with one blanket. Like, it's like, well, this is a vast upgrade from that, like even though we're sleeping on air mattresses on floors and eating government cheese, like it's better than that. And so I think I carried that with me and that helped kind of like sustain me through our tough times.
You're almost the fulfillment of a generational commitment to create a better life for the next generation.
Right.
Like our children are definitely experiencing things that neither of us were ever able to experience as children. But you specifically, your family fled from persecution for a renewed opportunity for the children to live without fear. Mm-hmm. And then the next generation moved to Canada for economic opportunities and education opportunities that weren't available in Paraguay. And then now you've moved here for economic reasons, well, also for health reasons, but for economic reasons to create a better experience for your children. So even without thinking about it, because I don't think we were processing that at the time, but even about thinking about it, you're like another chapter in the same story.
I feel like it's almost like rungs on a ladder.
Yeah.
Like climbing.
Just think of where 2 generations from us will be.
Right.
That's pretty, it as the trajectory continues, we feel like we've been gifted with opportunities to really impact and bless a lot of people. But a lot of times you and I talk about it and we're setting a foundation where any of our 5 children or all of our 5 children could take some of our projects and run with them and do even more because the foundation's been laid. One thing I did wanted to touch on, we talked a bit about the Mennonite backstory. You've had some experiences doing some hard things when it comes to cutting vices out of your life. And, I've seen you achieve some incredible achievements, reach some milestones and goals, and you've become really capable and good at setting specific goals and achieving those goals. And part of that process that I've been able to witness is you eliminating vices that might keep you from those goals. So I'd love if you could share kind of specifically, so maybe focus on a vice, share specifically how that vice was impacting you and what that change has meant, and maybe share with anybody who's listening who needs to hear it, like how could that help them?
Yeah. So when we're talking about achieving more, right? Like just every day, I always like to say progress over perfection, right? And it's like a climb. We're climbing like a ladder, whether, whatever that ladder is, just getting stronger every day, better every day. So in doing that, I like to think about things that aren't serving me, whether they're, you know, relationships, gossip, screen time, alcohol, drugs, it could be a myriad of things. Whatever that vice is for you, whatever is holding you back from achieving more and being the best version of yourself, getting stronger every day.
Can you specifically unpack alcohol? Because
Yeah.
that's one that I think a lot of people wrestle with.
Yeah. Yeah. So I like to just kind of take stock in what I'm doing, what kind of habits I'm forming, and how it's affecting me in my life, and what's working, what's not working, right? That's something that I ask. I'm a business coach, and I ask my clients that a lot. What's working, what's not working. And for me, a couple of years ago, I took stock in my life, and I decided that what was not working was alcohol. For me, it was not serving me. I found myself, so,
Yeah, I was gonna say, was there a moment of
yeah,
clarity for you, or
yeah,
because I feel like no one can come to you and be like, "Hey, you should eliminate this. It's
it's
gonna be
not
better."
working for
Yeah,
you.
this isn't
Yeah.
working for you. How did you come to that realization? Because everybody knows, like inside your head when we're talking about this, if there's a vice or something that is not serving you, you know what it is. No
Right.
one needs to tell
I
you. So
think as
how
soon as
did you get
someone
to that?
hears
Yeah,
the word vice, they probably know what their vice is. You know it in your gut,
yeah.
right? So, you know, I kind of came to the realization through an experience, and it was my rock bottom. And I was talking to a good friend of mine who he's been sober for decades, and he was sharing his story and his rock bottom. And his rock bottom is like, if there's a spectrum, he was on this end of the spectrum, and I'm definitely like, he's like, that is a very high low. That's what he
Yeah.
said to me.
Well, you
So
determine your own rock bottom, and
sure.
how rock bottom is just how low you're willing to go. And
Absolutely.
you were like, I've seen how far this can go.
Yeah.
This is my lowest I'm willing to go, and
Yeah.
that's
And
not a problem.
absolutely
That's
not.
great.
Yeah, yeah, I'm thankful for that. And to be candid, I've seen the negative effects of abusing alcohol, drugs, etc. in my own life through family members, friends. I have seen the detrimental effects of what that can look like if you let it go too far. And
And I know you've said specifically that there have been alcohol related deaths generations previously,
right.
and I mean that's scary.
Yeah.
And so we're not even talking about something needing to be present in, your siblings or your parents. What we're talking about is like if anywhere in your heritage, in your lineage, you can see certain vices, they can skip generations, right?
Hmm.
But there could be a predisposition. And so how
Right.
did you connect your experience to several generations ago, things that happened with alcohol, and how did that become a deciding moment for you?
Yeah. Yeah. And I've always been really aware of that. But for me, it was never really a problem. I'm a hardy Canadian woman. So I always joke, like, you've seen me, I could play flip cup with Fireball. Like, I can probably we would joke, like, I could hold my alcohol better than you. I could drink you under the table. But
That's not
uh,
She's not bragging. That's a bad thing.
it's not a good thing.
I've built
But
minimal tolerance.
so yeah, high tolerance, and also like it never really was an issue for me until it was. So for me, during COVID, this is probably a story that rings true for a lot of people. We all were stuck at home, and we kind of got into a habit of grabbing a seltzer and going on our daily walk, and you're drinking it like you're drinking a sparkling water. And that became habit for me um during those lockdown times, and then it just kind of carried on. And then I found myself like, it was part of my routine. I'd go to Trader Joe's and I'd pick up this, pick up that, and grab the cans of wine, and I'm drinking.
Real classy. Keep it classy. For those of you who are wondering, wine in a can is actually the next step after wine in a bottle. And so if you haven't done it, you haven't lived. No, we're talking about getting
It
rid of
wasn't wine
vices.
in a bag. Okay. But, it just kind of, I was noticing kind of patterns and trends and
Yeah.
habits forming, right? And they weren't like, it wasn't like it was stuff that was not working or it wasn't holding me back. I was still a great mother, a great wife. I was doing life. It was fine. But then it kind of like came to a head in 2022. We went on a vacation with my best friend in the world, and she brought her husband and her kids to Hawaii. We spent Christmas together. We had an incredible Christmas vacation together, and we had Christmas Day all planned out. And we spent Christmas Eve wrapping presents, and it was idyllic for me. It was just a dream come true. And Christmas Day was all planned out. And at the end of the day, I was super stoked about the evening portion. We were going to play Minute to Win It games. If anybody doesn't know, Minute to Win It is a
Pure
game show.
chaos.
Yeah, where you do these games. It's concentrated, chaotic fun. In a minute, you have to do kind of like crazy stuff, like
Camp stuff you would at summer camp.
blowing a ping pong ball
competitively.
across the table into like a hole, or pulling tissues out of the tissue box as fast as you can, competing with your partner. It was just stuff like that, and I was really excited about it. And so in the morning, it started out like with mimosas, and then we went to the beach and we were having margaritas, and then in the evening we're making Christmas dinner and I'm drinking wine. And then after dinner I passed out and totally blacked out and missed everything. I missed all the Minute to Win It games. I woke up around midnight, everything was over, and I'd missed Christmas. I didn't miss Christmas. I was there for, 2/3 of the day, but I missed like the part that I was
the
most
party.
looking forward to. And for me, it was devastating. Like, it really rocked me. And, we talk a lot about how time is a currency. It's that one thing you can't get back. And I think that because that is so important to us, or like integral to us, that like really hurt me. And so I just made a resolve with myself. I had a conversation with myself essentially, and I was like, Amanda, you're never going to miss anything ever again because of alcohol. Like, that's BS. Like, we're not doing that anymore. And I remember like looking in the mirror and having this conversation with myself and just being so resolved. And I'm like, how are we going to do this? So I decided to do dry January.
Because 1 month usually fixes every
Everything.
issue.
No, but I'd done things like Whole30 before, or I've done certain challenges
And pregnancies before.
Sure,
that you
I've been
didn't drink
pregnant 4
during.
times. So yeah, I've been, sober from alcohol for 10 months at least, 40 weeks. And so I was like, I can do a dry January. Let's just start there. And the first 3 weeks of January, I could have killed someone for a margarita. I was
Ew.
it was rough. I was really craving alcohol, and it was really hard for me. It was a struggle. But then, and I really thought, I'm like, February 1st is going to come and I'm going to have like 5 margaritas. Like, I'm going to go just party because I deserve it. I did this thing, this hard thing, and now we're going to be done. And I'm just going to like go and get back on the wagon. But then the last week of January, something shifted and I didn't crave it anymore. I didn't want it. And I really felt like a shift, like something felt different and better, and people were noticing. My skin was clearer. I was sleeping better. My trainer at the gym said I was performing better. And so all these things started kind of like coming together in that last week of January. And I was like, maybe I'll just go another month. Like, we'll do a dry February. My birthday's March 1st. I'm like, maybe I'll just go till my birthday, and then I'll have a drink on my birthday to celebrate. But then that rolled around, and then I didn't drink on my birthday, and then I did a dry March. And so it just kept going and going. And then, like, I'm a very competitive person with myself. I'm not very, just the way I'm wired.
You should see her doing card games.
I'm the worst. You do not want
No competitive bone in her body.
There's nothing there.
Does not care how the game's going. But with herself,
yeah.
Oh man.
It's on another level.
Yeah.
I always thought I wasn't a competitive person until I did some like personality assessment profiling, and I found out that harmony is something that is a really high value for me in relationships. And so I think that is the contributing factor. Like if you play Monopoly with me, you're not going to have a
You'd
good
rather
time.
all own the same hotels,
Right, because
have
I'm
the
like,
same amount of money, everybody
yes,
smiling and high-fiving everybody else's
because I,
wins.
I think I'm just like, okay, let's
Yeah.
just leave this experience as friends,
Yeah.
right? And the way that we're all friends is that we all win.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But with yourself,
with myself, I'm very competitive. It's me versus me every day. And so I'm like that in the gym. I'm like that with my business goals. I'm like that, in almost every area of my life. And so I think that I really tapped into that with this. Like, I was like, okay, I've been sober while I've been pregnant. That was 10 months. So could I go 11 months? Could I go 12 months?
can you beat your previous personal
Yeah.
best?
What about if I do a year? Like, what about 500 days? What about 1,000 days? Like, I had these like kind of milestones in my head where I'm like, okay, I can do that. What if I could do that?
Yeah.
How would that feel? And so I've just been reaching new milestones, and it's just been feeling better and better and better.
So talk to me about, one of the interesting milestones was that the 500th day happened to fall on Mother's Day.
Yeah.
So I have two questions for you. The first one is, how has this impacted your parenting? How do you feel it's impacted your parenting specifically? And then let's talk through some of the goals and achievements you've had since cutting alcohol.
Yeah. I think that since cutting alcohol out of my life, I have just been overall clearer, right? Like, so when you're clearer, you're able to make decisions better. You're able to be more present with people. You're able to just be a more whole person. And so that is obviously more beneficial for my children. And I think for us, like me being in a relationship, me being more present and clear and available is just, a good thing. So I think that that's the first thing that comes to mind when I think about how it's benefited me to cut, like how cutting out alcohol out of my life has benefited me in my relationships with my children and my husband.
So the timeline was, that's the first question.
Mm-hmm.
The again, back to the second question.
And also, can I just say, I also think that it's been really beneficial for my children to see me do something like this and kind of like reframe their relationship with alcohol. Like, it's made it, they've seen something different. Like, it's not like using alcohol is just the norm.
Yeah.
Like, it is for you because you don't have an issue with it. It isn't for me because I have an issue with it. And so showing them that, like, if you have an issue with something, then you can stop. And that can be your new normal. And they're like, they've really picked up on it. And they're like, oh no, my mom doesn't drink. Like,
yeah.
and
And
so,
I was going to point that out too. Is like, our kids get to see that there are two healthy choices that are opposite of each other, right? Because, I love passion fruit, maracuya, where I grew up, in lilikoi in Hawaii. But I love passion fruit drinks, and they make very tasty, like, passion fruit margaritas. Without cutting out alcohol in my life and being open and willing to have a drink when I go out, I still will have maybe 2 to 3 of these drinks that I really do like in a month. And so our children, and anybody who looks at us gets to see two healthy choices.
Right.
It's not that one vice is everyone's vice. It's
Right.
definitely not that, and you're not saying that either. That's why we're saying, when we say the word vice, think about the thing you're thinking right now. That's the thing we're talking about. We're not talking about specifically alcohol.
Yeah.
For you, I would love to hear, the timeline was, I believe it was the 2021, Christmas 2021.
2022.
Christmas 2022.
It was December 30th, 2022 is when that was my last day.
Right. All the
I'm
years with 5
right.
kids, all the years run together. No, I'm trying to think of the timeline of your businesses and all your stuff happening.
Yeah,
So
that happened.
you started your business before you cut alcohol.
Yes. I launched a business in February of 2022, so about 6 months before.
Right. And so you launched a business, you did a hard thing, you started this process, and you were functioning fine. Like, you were reasonably successful by most indications.
There's a lot of functional alcoholics out there.
Yes. Yeah, I was going to say that. So, that is very true. But for you, it was like you cut alcohol and a few other things out. I know
Right.
one thing was for you, you mentioned harmony,
Mhm.
and you had a few specific relationships where
I
there was a tendency for gossip and
Yeah.
and that was way outside of your comfort zone, but to feel accepted, to feel a part, you engage in that.
Mhm.
And so that was just one example of a behavior that was outside of your comfort zone and who true you is. And so you made a bunch of choices, and alcohol just was one of them.
Yeah.
So I'd love to talk about, like, by addressing vices, we're talking about alcohol because it's a specific one that people understand. You did cut other ones out.
Mhm.
We talk about, addiction to social media. You have a very healthy presence on social media. It's part of your business, but that is where you leave it. You make a distinction. You have your business social media branding, and then the way we both use social media is as a placeholder for memories. We put stuff there. We
Mhm.
make little reels, make little things that our kids are going to look back on
And
and enjoy.
also, we've used social media to bring awareness to things
Correct.
like that are important to
Older
us,
child adoption.
spread positivity.
Yeah, we adopted a child who was older, and so we tell that story through social media. We have an organ donation between us. Not between us, but one of us donated
You
an organ.
donated an organ,
I
you
donated
donated
an
a
organ.
kidney, and I walked alongside you
Yeah.
during that time. And so living organ donation is something that we advocate for, and you have a social
Yeah,
media
One
account that
Kidney
promotes
Adventures
that.
is an Instagram account where I just tell the story of how you can still live a full adventurous life
Right.
with
But I
one
think
kidney.
both of us can admit that it can become a vice for
Right.
us.
What I was going to say is a lot of people, that vice shows up, 11:30 till 2 a.m. when you have a big appointment the next day or a
Right.
big business meeting. And so that's a very clear, easy example of you remove that vice of doom scrolling, wormholes or going down the deep wormhole of YouTube, watching
Right.
videos. You take that out and you immediately replace that with sleep, and your whole life changes.
Everything changes.
Your health changes, your productivity changes,
And that
everything
might
changes.
literally take you having to like plug your phone in on the other side of the house,
Or
like
removing
outside of your
apps
room.
from your phone, or like
Totally.
I know people who take Facebook off, but they leave Messenger on because that's where, we have a
Right.
family chat there with my family.
And I've done that before. I've
Yeah.
deleted apps, put them back on. And really, I think what it comes down to is taking stock, taking stock. Like when we live in such a busy, inundated way of life, right? Like, and if you don't, in my line of work where I teach my business clients best practices, I teach them about clarity breaks.
Yeah.
And a clarity break is just a time for you to get out of the weeds of your business and work on your business. Think about on your business rather than in. And I think that is something that we need to take time, just as humans, like whether you're an entrepreneur or not, to really stop, pause, and reflect and take time to think about on your life, not just in your life, right? Like high level, try to like float above your life and look at how your life is going, and the results that you're getting, are they the results that you want, and what could be holding you back, and how can you remove things or put boundaries in your life to get more of what you want.
When we're pushing busy, we're often just solving symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
What you're talking about is that clarity break, that 30,000 foot view where you pull out of solving all the issues that keep coming up, and you're like, what is causing this issue?
Yeah.
And so, for you, the one you're talking about today was alcohol. After that was cut, where have the gains come for you? And then after that, like how would someone else, what could they expect
Yeah.
from making cuts with their vices?
Yeah. So I think, like I mentioned before, the gains have been like my skin is cleared up, I'm sleeping better, I'm more aware, I'm more present, I'm clearer, I'm achieving more. I'm achieving more at the gym, I'm achieving more in my business. Like it's like a snowball effect, right? Like and then one thing I have to say is like, and this is like a not so great part of the process, but when you remove something like a vice that you're pouring yourself into, or that you're, putting your time and energy into, sometimes other things will bubble up for you. And so I've had to deal with emotions and triggers and trauma that maybe I was using alcohol to numb and shove down. And so that isn't like a fun part of it, but that has been a really great part of it, because, I went back to therapy and I worked through a lot of stuff, and I think that it all stems from taking that one thing away that I knew wasn't serving me. It sort of like really propelled me in a new direction where it almost like it was like jet fuel to my personal growth,
Yeah.
because I took away this numbing agent, or this, like, it was almost like I was using it as a band-aid, and when I ripped it off, then man, things came like up to the surface, and I really had no choice but to deal with them. And then as a result, I've become a better person.
I think one thing I'm trying to get at that you will always hesitate to talk about are the achievements that's come
Mm-hmm.
from these choices. And so, since you are not going there, I will talk about them. One of the things you talked about, there's several numerical things where you set goals for your business and stuff, but then there were other things that were bolt-ons, additions to what you were doing at the time. So you were building this practice. You're an EOS implementer. You help guide businesses towards leveling up in 6 key areas, and you're really good at it.
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And at the time, you were 6, 8, 10 months into running that business, and you were definitely in the grind, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so none of that would have changed without alcohol. You're definitely in the
Yep.
grind, and you need to do that. And we all have to go through that when we're building businesses and we're building something new. There's a time of the creation time, which takes a lot of work. But you had some additional things, like you wanted to be on the microphone in front of crowds of people. You wanted to deliver talks. You really wanted to build a business that was generating. You had an ambition, early stage ambition, of you wanted to build a business that generated $500,000 a year with low overhead. You had all these specifics, and then you had some of the more vague stuff. And I love that, 1 year after you launch your business and 2 months after you cut alcohol, you were on stage giving a talk at a women's conference,
Mm-hmm.
and as a paid speaker. And that had never even been on your radar before.
Right.
And because of that, and because of other experiences, EOS, the organization, asked you to take over their social media at their last conference. You did a wonderful job. I got a lot of eyes on what they were doing and made it fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's who you are. But you also, from that, now an organization has asked you to come and MC their entire event,
Mm-hmm.
which is a multi-day event, conference, and you're the main woman on the mic, and that was so far off your radar.
Mm-hmm.
But now things like writing a book, building a course for women to follow to achieve what they want in life. Maybe talk a little bit about that, because some of that stuff is still being worked on right now. But those things, if you hadn't taken those early steps of believing in yourself, going back to the immigrant mentality of like, I'm betting on myself, I can
Mm-hmm.
do this, right? I can choose to do hard things. If you hadn't taken that step, and then if you hadn't begun to eliminate the vices that popped into your head right now, like it's popping in your head right now, if you hadn't started to take those steps to eliminate the vices that were distracting and delaying the achievements, I don't believe you'd be this far along.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
talk to me a little bit about where you see removing vices as specifically impacting some of those goals. End with maybe sharing where you're going. We have a whole nother episode coming about your EOS journey, so you don't want to give too much of that secret sauce away. But I'd love to hear specifically where you've seen achievements happen. Right behind you, up on the wall, you have California State Senate 2024 Women of Distinction Award up there that you received. And, you have a Woman of Impact Award honoree right behind you as well, which is just off screen because you prefer it that way. But talk to me about some of those things that you believe are related to eliminating vices, and then maybe end with sharing with people a few things they can expect when they actually look in the mirror and they allow themselves to look at the vices instead of just the version of themselves that they're presenting to other people. We all see we have the opportunity to see two people in the mirror. The person we present to everybody else, and then actually the person that's inside, that's hiding behind the mask a bit. And so I'd love you to share, some of the achievements that have come from eliminating your vices and continuing to eliminate them and work on them, and then what people can expect if they do the same.
Yeah. So with the program that I coach my leaders on, and we run our business on EOS. I run my own implementing business, my coaching practice on EOS. I walk the talk. We create something called a 3-year picture. And a 3-year picture is a stepping stone towards your long-term energizing goal, your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, right? So I have a long-term goal, and I created a 3-year picture to to really visualize what that looks like. If you can see it and feel it and believe it, then the chances that you'll achieve it are significantly higher. There's this saying, what the mind sees and believes it achieves, right? So I painted this picture, this 3-year picture, and it had stuff on it like writing a New York Times bestseller book, being a keynote speaker, a paid keynote speaker on a big stage. Things that really at that time when I wrote my initial 3-year picture, I'm looking back, I'm like, you had no business putting that stuff on there. And I did. And some of that stuff has fallen off the 3-year picture in less time than 3 years, which has been really cool to
By
see.
falling off, you mean you've checked the box.
Right.
Yeah.
I've achieved those things, right? And I don't think it's by coincidence. I know we joke about the word manifesting, but like I really do think that manifesting is just a way of you seeing and believing for yourself what you can achieve. And I put it to paper, I visualized it, I focused on it, I created goals around it.
And you shared it with others.
Absolutely. And that's a key piece, is sharing that picture with other people so that they can keep you accountable. I have people in my life who hold my feet to the fire and keep me highly accountable. And
How do you feel that, what role does sharing the fact that you're facing a vice, what role does that play in the success of eliminating the vice?
Oh, I think it plays a huge role. Like if you keep things in the dark, you keep things secret, they're only going to fester and breed and become, bigger secrets and worse. So I think that when you expose things, bring things to the light, you can conquer those things more easily. Like we've talked about how important community is, and people keeping you accountable is just like instilling that community around you, and that support is huge. So I think
And how can people respect your boundaries if you don't tell them your boundaries?
Right.
How can people support
Absolutely.
your choice to eliminate vices if you don't tell them that you're working
Yeah.
hard to eliminate this as a vice, right?
Yeah,
And I love how you are when it comes to alcohol, is like you don't project your vice on anybody else.
absolutely.
And I think that's important. An important takeaway is that, something that you struggle with, I don't struggle with, something I struggle with, you don't struggle with, and that's
Right.
true across the board.
Yeah.
And so when we start feeling like us conquering a vice makes us better than people around us, we're misunderstanding the nature of these vices.
Then you move into like judgment, right?
Yeah,
Like
but we're also misunderstanding the fact that like I don't need to not have an alcoholic drink for 2 consecutive years to have it not impact me at work or at play or with family. And so, I know you don't talk a ton about not drinking alcohol. You do every once in a while. It's part of your branding. It's part of sharing your story of how you're building your brand. It's an important part, but you don't go around saying like, I kicked this and what's wrong
Right.
with you?
Totally.
Because you kicked something that's not someone else's vice.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to stop doing something that's not one of your vices, but they may need to, right?
Right.
And so that's an important distinction. But yeah, your business is booming.
Mm-hmm.
Always willing to take on more clients. I can't help but think that a lot of the consistency of the drive behind that success comes from intentionally eliminating distractions. We'll call vices distractions, right?
Right.
So for you, alcohol was a distraction. If you had a glass of wine in the evening, you weren't going to be that productive. Well, guess what? Our bedroom, you can see through that window up there down into this room, and I can see you lots of times working on stuff back here that would come after that evening wine time. That evening wine time doesn't happen anymore. So this happens.
Right.
You do business development. Well, start adding those hours up, like an hour
now,
here and there.
Yeah. Also, I'm not hungover, so I'm able to,
In the morning too.
Get up and
But
do
I mean
things.
specifically like biz dev that was happening during this hour. The kids go to sleep. You have a little bit of time. You're back here looking at the whiteboards. You're doing financial projections. You're working through warm leads. You're working through opportunities to help first. We'll touch on that at a different time, like one of our core values. And so you're finding intentional opportunities to live out our core values, which brings your business into alignment with your personal life. Mm-hmm. And so I really see and notice, by looking through the window, I can see you in here very focused and driven and pushing. And that time is then gone. If you're having a couple glasses of wine and you're sitting in the hot tub and then you're not doing that biz dev. And there is a time for hot tubbing and all that fun stuff. But think about all those hours,
Absolutely.
those many, many, many hours of business development that have been able to happen after the kids have gone to bed, after dinner, or in the late afternoon when otherwise you'd be cutting out a little early, having a drink, going for a walk or something like that. So cutting the vices out frees up time for other things. But then it's important that we understand that we need to redeem that new time in order to achieve the achievements and the goals that we're wanting to pursue. And that's something I think that you've done really well. I know you've done really well. You've eliminated a vice, but then not replace it with a new vice. That's very
Yeah.
common.
And I think, I've talked online on my social media about where confidence comes from. And confidence comes from keeping the promises that you make to yourself.
Mm.
So I've made promises to myself and kept them. And I think that that's helped me to achieve more
Yeah.
in my business, in my personal life, because it proves to myself that I can do that thing. And then I know that I can do the next thing,
Yeah.
right? So I think that that's been kind of the root of it, is keeping that promise to myself produced confidence that I could do more. And then I just dove in and did more and more and more and more. So
I love it. We don't eliminate vices for other people, but eliminating vices does positively impact other people around us.
Sure.
We have to eliminate it for ourselves. And so you got to the point where you said, this doesn't serve me.
Right.
And when I eliminate it, then I serve my family better. I serve my loved ones better. I serve my community better. I serve my business better. And so all those things are ripple impacts. But if it doesn't start with you asking yourself, does this serve me?
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really hard in secret to, in the secret quiet moments alone, to still stay committed to removing a vice that you eliminated for someone else,
Mm-hmm.
right? If you eliminate it for yourself, it doesn't matter if you're alone.
Sure.
And so maybe finish with this. You talk about the 4 of the key triggers for vices, for addictions, for things like that. And yeah, do you know what I'm talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So touch on those and just kind of end with that, because that awareness can help people if they're thinking right now, is this a vice? Like, start to think through, are these the moments when I engage in that behavior, that activity, that whatever that is? If one of these 4 things is happening right before that, that can be an indication. So
Yeah.
I love the practical takeaway. So if you can finish with sharing that would be awesome.
Yeah, I shared this with you the other day because people will ask me, like, does it bother you when you go out into social situations and people are drinking, or is that tempting for you? And it's absolutely not. I can be in a social situation or out on a date night with you or whatever, and people are drinking, and it's just not a temptation for me. For me, when it is tempting is when there's an acronym called HALT: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So I've noticed those are definite triggers for me. If I'm hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that's when I'm kind of like, I wish I could have a drink right now. So it just would be so much easier to cope with what's going on right now if I could just numb out.
It's really tough to
And-
treat pain when you numb it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's hard to find the source.
I know it's not the best and right thing, but rightly or wrongly, people do it.
Yeah.
And so I don't have that ability to do that. And so it's pretty frustrating, right? In those moments. But yeah, so hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That's kind of what I'll ask myself, if I'm ever feeling kind of triggered or tempted. I'm like, okay, hold on. Are you hungry? Are you lonely? Are you angry? Are you tired? What can you do? What other things can you do to mitigate that, to make yourself feel better, to resolve this, So I've been able to resource or tap into things that are better for me to resolve those issues or those feelings.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing so candidly. I know that's not something that you always do comfortably, so choosing to be candid and open and honest, it is aligned with our values, and you did a great job. And everybody basically just got to experience what it's like to go on a long car ride with us. That's what's so odd about this, is we feel like we're just having a conversation that we would normally have on a car ride,
Right.
or after dinner, or even sometimes with the kids, just sitting around with the kids. And now there's a camera right there. So it's odd. It's a little different for us.
Well, look, I hope it resonated with someone. I hope something that I said maybe bring something up for someone. And if it's been encouraging or if it has resonated with you, then reach out and let's chat.
If you're the one viewer that this spoke to, please let us know. When we started advocating for older child adoption, we said, man, it'd be great if we could tell our story, give a different version than what people think about older child adoption is like, And if one person, one child could get adopted because somebody heard our story and thought, why not us? How cool would that be, right?
Mhm.
And then the first event we spoke at, a couple walked up at the very end of the event and said, like, hey, we just want you to know we watched the video of your adoption story, and you have 4 young kids, we have 3 young kids, and we thought if they could do it, why not us? And in a few months, we're bringing home our son. That was amazing, right? So we're really doing this for the one person that needs to hear it, that really would have loved to have been in the backseat of the truck when we were talking. So that's basically what we're doing, is we're just talking in the front seat of the truck and inviting you to sit in on the car ride with us. So yeah, this has been awesome. Thank you so much.
For sure. Thanks for listening.
Let me do it,
No.
but